The plot kind of takes a back seat and this becomes a romance book, and I was sad. I was eating it up. Oh my God. Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, my name is Megan, and today we are going to be talking about the 14, yes, you heard that right, 14 books I read in February, and if I think that they live up to the hype. This is going to be a longish video, so get yourself a drink, maybe a snack. Let's get cozy and let's talk about some books. This is my first reading wrap-up video, so we're going to be playing around with how I want to structure this. But first I want to start with some quick reading stats. I had an average rating of 4.27 stars. I forgot, I actually had quite a few 5 stars this month, which is kind of rare for me. I read about 120 books last year, and I think I only rated like 5 or 6 of them 5 stars. So for me to have more than one in a month is pretty rare because I do not give those out generously. So now let's get into the books that I read, and I'm going to start with the series that I read, because you know this if you're into reading any type of fantasy. A lot of those series are super long, or there's going to be new ones coming out in a few years. And so I am trying desperately to get caught up on all these series that I started last year, because if you watched my March TBR video, you know that I am a chronic series starter, but I am like, take me to jail because I never finish them. It's a pretty bad habit, if I'm being completely honest. So the first ones are going to be the Gods and Monsters series from... Okay, maybe I just need some more coffee. Okay, first series that I read this month is the Gods and Monsters series. I read book 2 and book 3, so Throne of Broken Gods and The Dawn of the Cursed Queen. The 4th book comes out in May, and I'm very excited for that because this series, specifically the 2nd book, The Throne of Broken Gods, you guys, is one of the few where I feel like the balance between the romance and the plot is done really well. It is in a darker setting, right? Like it's in a like kind of dark, like urban fantasy setting. Typically you would expect to see, you know, our MMC kind of be this like dark, broody, like kind of like a jerk. But we love him. You know, he's just like walking red flags, but we're eating it up the whole time. Sam Keel in this book series is the polar opposite of that. He's a walking green flag, like, and our female main character is the villain in the story. She used to be a human, and then she got turned into a monster. And so there's this whole inner turmoil that she's experiencing, trying to hold on to her humanity. And think about in Vampire Diaries, whenever they can turn off their humanity, right? And then they just go on like a bloodbath and a rampage.
Turn it off. Turn it off!
That's kind of the dynamic in this book. She goes on a revenge arc, right? Because something crazy happens at the end of book 1. There are cliffhangers at the ends of these books, but I kind of love that. So the 2nd book in the series, I rated 5 stars. The spice was incredible. The plot was really good and super interesting, but the romance was just... it was so good. I love a yearning, pining man, and that is Sam Keel, but he's also touch her and die. So like best of both worlds. So if you haven't read this series already, highly recommend putting it on the top of your TBR, because I know for a lot of you it's been on there for a long time. I know that was definitely for me, but it is so well worth it. The next series I read was the Hunger Games trilogy. I read all 3 books. I loved this. Overall, I thought it was a good time. I did listen to these on audio though, and I will say the narrator I was not a big fan of. Katniss is obviously 16. She's super young, and the narrator sounded like she was in her 30s. And like my brain was just like, I cannot compute. Like this is not Katniss. Like if the narrator doesn't match the character, it can kind of pull me out of the story a little bit. And these books are pretty plot driven. Book 1 was more plot heavy. Book 2, I feel like it was a good blend of plot, character development, and relationship building. And then book 3, I feel like we were kind of back to like the main plot. And I don't know, book 3 was just not my favorite. It felt really redundant at times, and it honestly felt a little too long, and that book's not even that long. Book 2, Catching Fire, was my favorite one because there was more character development and there was more relationship building, which is something that I really like in books. Otherwise, if it's just plot forward, it's gonna feel kind of shallow to me. So book 2 was really good. Still rated The Hunger Games 4 stars. I think I rated Catching Fire 4.5 stars, and then I rated Mockingjay 4 stars as well. So overall, it was still like a highly rated series for me, and I'm really glad that I read it. And I'm actually excited to rewatch the movies because I don't even know that I've watched the third movie. I know I've seen the first 2, but it's just been a long time. So the next series that I read, Powerless, Powerful, and then Reckless. Those are the 3 books that are out right now. And this is a YA fantasy romance. There's no spice, but there's a lot of tension and yearning and banter. I did a 24-hour readathon a couple weeks ago, and that's where I reacted to this book. So if you want to watch me in real time reading it and getting my like live updates, definitely go check that video out because it was a fun time. I will say that this book series was so fun. Like, the book gets a lot of hate because of its similarities to The Hunger Games and Red Queen. I haven't read Red Queen yet, so I don't know that reference, but I will say, like, this definitely does have elements in the plot that are very similar to The Hunger Games, but there's enough that is different about it that, to me, especially now that I read The Hunger Games trilogy, that's kind of why I read it, was because I started with this and I was like, I gotta know, like, how similar really is this? Because it has magic. The Hunger Games doesn't have magic. There's a really heavy romance in this one that isn't reluctant romance as there is in The Hunger Games, right? Like Katniss, and there's like this love triangle thing basically going on in The Hunger Games, and Katniss is like she's not really interested in either one of them, right? Like, that's not the case with this. Like, there is a very heavy romance in this, and it is done so well. I absolutely adore the romance in this series. Kai is the definition of pining man. Like, if you looked it up, like, his face would be there. And I have heard that Lauren Roberts really loves a pining man, and she writes him well. Oh my God. I ended up rating this one 4 stars. I thought it was good. Like, it was nothing new, right? Like, this is not like a revolutionary fantasy romance that's trying to do anything super new, but it was still fun. And I do think this would be a great entry point for people into the genre that's not just ACOTAR or Fourth Wing, especially for people that maybe are reluctant to read something with a lot of spice in it too. And I will definitely be recommending this to people that are new to the genre. Now, Reckless, the book 2 in this series, I rated this book 5 stars. I have thought about this book every day since I read it, and this is where the plot kind of takes a back seat and this becomes a romance book, and I was sad. I was eating it up. Oh my God. And I also, while I was reading these, I was listening to these on audio. If you have not had the pleasure of having any of your audiobooks read by Chase Brown, girl, oh my God, I have never heard a man match a character more than I have in this book series. Like, Kai's character is very much like the cool guy that is like kind of sarcastic and knows he's the shit, you know, and he walks the walk and talks the talk, you know what I mean? And somehow Chase Brown was able to capture kind of that like snarky, like confident, kind of arrogant tone to his voice when he's narrating Kai, and it was just perfect. Like, I was like, yeah, if this man was telling me this, I would be drooling in real life. I highly recommend the audiobooks with this. I think that is honestly what made Reckless 5 stars for me. And you get the tone and the inflection, and it just makes the story hit that much harder. So narrator 5 stars, story 5 stars. And like I said, it is a full-on romance. People really didn't like that. There was a lot of controversy around that and people being disappointed by that. But to me, I'm like, it's a fantasy romance. So it makes sense to me that the romance takes center stage, and it's not like we don't learn anything that's relevant to the plot moving forward that I'm sure is going to be brought up in book 3. A lot that's actually uncovered. We get a lot of information about things that were hidden from our main character. So I am so looking forward to book 3, and I'm really glad that I picked this up because I wasn't going to because of all the negative reviews that I saw, mainly about Reckless. But the next book comes out in April. Bet your bottom dollar I'm gonna be getting that book and I'm gonna be reading it, and I'm so So excited. The next books we can talk about are all the romance books that I read, because that is the main portion of what I read. So the first one was If You Love Her by Marissa Hartz. You guys, I binged this in 24 hours. I could not put it down. It was so addicting and so good, and it is spicy, and I will tell you the spice. It was good, it hit. Now, she is an indie author that I found on TikTok, and this book is kind of a second chance romance, but it's between our main male character and his bully that was in high school. They end up getting trapped in a cabin together in a snowstorm. And he is also mute, by the way, so he doesn't talk. Somehow there isn't any miscommunication. Kudos to the author there. Any kind of like traumatic moments or like moments that would make you feel like secondhand embarrassment, she fully went there, and I really appreciate it. Like there were times like, oh, like we're like, you know, we're not holding back at all. You really get to feel the emotions that the characters are feeling. And what I also appreciate about this book is that you feel the spectrum of emotions that come with being a human being, because you get to see all sides of these characters. They're not one-dimensional. You get to see the good, bad, the ugly, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you enjoy checking out indie author books, but you're not sure like of a good one to read, I highly recommend checking this one out. It is well worth your time. All right, next is Deepened by Ali Hazelwood. Why was this as controversial as it was? This is a good example of like there needing to be context and nuance explained about a book, because for some readers that are used to reading really spicy books, this is gonna seem vanilla. Somebody who is used to reading rom-coms or maybe YA or other books that aren't as spicy, this is going to feel pretty spicy. That's where we have to think about the context of the relationship that's in this book. So this follows two competitive swimmers. One is a diver, one is a swimmer, but they're both competitive at the collegiate level. And they both find out that they have the same sexual preferences as far as exploring kink and BDSM and all that kind of stuff. But this is their first relationship kind of doing so. The people that were disappointed about it but not being spicier, maybe them not exploring stuff on this list that they've made together of all the things that they're willing to try. It's like, this is a new relationship for both of them. This is the first time they're both getting to explore that. So I felt the amount of spice was actually appropriate for the relationship that was in this book. The only thing that I didn't like that kept me from rating this 5 stars was there was an ex-girlfriend kind of at the back towards the end of this book that was acting kind of weird, and I felt like that was thrown in there because there was no like, other than that, there really wasn't any like what was the word? My brain isn't working. There wasn't really any like big conflict. That just felt kind of thrown in there to create a conflict to get over. Instead of like a third act breakup, it was like a third act conflict with the best friend. But overall, I ended up rating this 4 stars, and I really enjoyed it. I just really like Ali's writing, and I love that she always writes women in STEM, because I'm a dietitian myself, and this main female character was pre-med, and I had to take all the pre-med classes in college. The main female character is very relatable in the sense of like she struggles with perfectionism and stuff like that, and how that can really hold her back, because you really have to work so hard and be perfect on paper to get through into med school or any like post-bachelor program. This is only my second Ali Hazelwood book, but I'm looking forward to reading more of her books. She's probably going to be an auto-buy author for me at this point. So now this next one is Credence by Penelope Douglas. I don't have my physical copy because as soon as I posted about me reading this, my friends were like, oh, can I borrow it? This book was crazy. If you've been interested in this, just check the trigger warnings, but basically it is like a weird coming of age story. And so our main female character is 17 and her parents pass away, and basically her estranged step uncle reaches out because he was the one named on the will to take care of her in the event something happened to her parents. I know. He's estranged. Why would they do that? I don't know. But basically she goes to live with them out in a cabin out in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, where it's basically 2003 MTV Spring Break and everybody is just sexually feral. That is the tone of this book. But if you set that aside, and there is a lot more going on than just like the sexual part of the story. At the beginning of the book, Penelope Douglas says, she's like, I write books to be polarizing. I do that. And she does it on purpose, right? So this is a taboo romance, and if the themes in this book bother you, like just don't do it. I understand there's going to be a hard line for a lot of people. For me, I was in the mood to read it, and I really enjoyed it because it is honestly a very character-driven story, and I am a character-driven reader. I typically prefer that in my stories. I feel like it gives even something that on the surface, oh my God, I could never read that. Like, why would you read something about this young girl and her step uncle and her step cousins and them getting it on, right? Like, why would you ever read something like that? But Penelope Douglas did a really wonderful job of like persuading me to understand and connect with these characters individually on a deeper level, and understand how, like I said, this was like a weird coming of age story for our main female character, and how each one of them that she's interacting with help her grow in some way. Yeah, I actually thought it was like a really good story. I will probably read it again at some time in the future, and I know not everybody's gonna understand that. It's just one of those things, you have to read it and try it for yourself, but I totally understand if it's not going to be it's just not. But I was very pleasantly surprised with how deep of an emotional story that this was. Yeah, I ended up rating it 5 stars, and I'm not gonna sit here and say I will ever recommend it to people, because I probably won't. I feel like if you've ever been interested in it, you just have to find that book on your own time. I can only give you my thoughts and what I thought about it, but I'm not gonna sit here and tell you have to go read it, because I know for sure it is not for everyone. Okay, and then next is Scythe and Sparrow. This is book 3. I don't remember the name of this trilogy. Our female main character, and she travels with the circus basically, and then she gets hurt, and then she gets an injury, and she goes to the hospital, and there's this hot doctor, and it was giving like Grey's Anatomy. What was his name? What did they call him? Like doctor, he had like a pet name. I'll probably find it after I edit this video. He ends up following up on her case, and he was like, your trailer that you're traveling in is unsanitary, so you need to come live with me. And she agrees, and everything unfolds from there. This book was spicy. Probably the spiciest book I've read all month, but it was good. It was good spice, I'm not gonna lie. Questionable use of cotton candy. I don't know that I'll be able to look at it the same, but it was still entertaining to read about. We had all the witty banter, the humor, the dark humor that I love about this series, but I will say like the romance side of things wasn't my favorite, because it was mainly just like insta-lust, and the whole romance was just about the physical intimacy, and I wish we would have gotten more of that like emotional intimacy from the story. But overall, I thought it was a really funny, like entertaining book, so I ended up rating it 4 stars. The last book that I read was actually a thriller. So I read When She Returned, and I think I ended up rating this one 3.75 stars, and this one was not what I was expecting, but like Lucinda Berry is I don't know if she's still a psychologist or she's a former psychologist or an author. I think that's what it is. Her books are very real. You are actually experiencing what people would be going through and thinking in their inner monologue if these things were actually happening to them. This woman ends up disappearing, and her family thinks that she was abducted and murdered, but actually she was abducted into a cult, and she randomly shows back up one day. Her family, including her ex-husband, who is now remarried, so there's a weird dynamic there, and then now her young daughter is now a teenager, and so she comes back into the fold, into this different family dynamic, and the family is fighting on like, they trust her, can they not trust her, is she still in the cult, is she not in the cult, and it is just this wild like roller coaster ride the entire time, and I loved it. I ended up rating it 3.75 stars. Wasn't quite 4 stars because I honestly wish it was a little bit longer, and I was really frustrated with some of the characters. Like the dad in this story, I wanted to like punch him in the face several times, but it still got me to feel something nonetheless, even if it was negative emotions. But yeah, it was still a fun time. I highly recommend it. If you enjoy stories about cults, you will love this. I thought it was pretty good. Those are all the books that I read in the month of February. Let me know what your favorite and least favorite books of February were, because I want to interact with you guys. I want to be talking about more books, right? Like, so let's take this conversation into the comments. And if you've made it to the end of this video, I love you. You're a real one. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Well, I hope you have a wonderful February. March. I hope you have a wonderful March and that you have a great, great, great reading month. And I look forward to hearing how it goes next time. Bye.